Today, we're cutting straight to the heart of a pretty big topic.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah, it's definitely one that gets talked about a lot.
And the core question we're exploring is, are women actually drawn to it? We've got some great articles, some solid research, and we're going to try and, unpack the myths.
Exactly. Get past the stereotypes and see what the evidence really says about attraction and, importantly, respect. It's often, well, distorted.
It really is. So let's kick things off with a little scene. Picture a cafe, right? You've got Mark, maybe talking a bit too loud, bragging about getting one over on a coworker, clicking his fingers at the server, that kind of thing.
Okay, I can picture Mark.
Then across the room, there's Alex. He's quieter, but seems, genuinely self-assured, maybe listening really intently to a friend who seems upset. And someone watching, let's call her Sarah. She's looking at both and thinking, what is the difference in their confidence? What makes one kind stick with you versus the other?
That's a perfect setup because it shows right away that masculinity isn't just one thing. And that's super important when we talk about toxic masculinity.
Right.
It's not saying masculinity itself is bad, not at all. It's about a specific harmful set of behaviors that come from these really rigid, narrow ideas of what a real man is supposed to be.
Okay, so let's really get into that definition.
Yeah.
What is toxic masculinity, practically speaking? Because it feels like a term people throw around, maybe without always meaning the same thing.
Well, fundamentally, it often circles around a few core ideas. One is that dominance is how you prove your worth as a man.
Okay.
Another is suppressing emotions. Anything other than maybe anger is seen as weak, men don't cry, that whole thing.
Right, the classic stoic image.
Exactly. And also this intense need to always win, to be on top, collaboration. That's seen as losing somehow.
So it's like taking normal traits like assertiveness or confidence and twisting them, pushing them too far.
Precisely. Healthy masculinity involves things like emotional intelligence, knowing your feelings, understanding others. It involves accountability, owning your actions, and being assertive but respectfully.
Okay.
Toxic masculinity kind of warps those. Courage becomes aggression. Resilience turns into just shutting down emotionally, refusing to admit you're hurt.
And strength means putting others down.
Yeah, that's a common manifestation. Like one of the articles mentioned, a manager who constantly belittles his team just to feel powerful. That's that dominance thing in action. And the research from the APA clearly connects that pressure to bottle things up with, worse mental health for men.
That hyper-competitive thing you mentioned, I feel like we see that a lot. This constant need to one-up everyone.
We do. And it's interesting because a study, I think it was 2022, Journal of Social Psychology, it found this kind of toxic competitiveness actually lowered team productivity by 27%.
Wow, so it actually backfires.
Totally. Undermines the very success it's supposedly about.
And this isn't exactly new, is it? Where did these ideas even come from?
Well, the sources suggest looking back historically. Think Industrial Revolution, physical strength, stoicism were prized for men in certain jobs.
Makes sense.
And then post-World War II culture often doubled down on that tough guy image. Didn't leave much space for vulnerability.
Okay, so that's the negative side, the toxic version. What about the healthy side? What does that look like day to day?
It's much richer, really. Emotional intelligence is huge. A UCLA study just last year found men who were comfortable expressing emotions. They reported 34% stronger romantic relationships.
34%, that's significant.
Isn't it? Then there's accountability, owning mistakes, learning. And respectful assertiveness, standing your ground, taking initiative, but without needing to make someone else feel small.
A completely different feel. And we've got some stats here that really seem to push back against the whole idea that women are actually looking for the toxic stuff.
Right, absolutely. These numbers are pretty telling. Pew Research found, I think in 2022, that 73% of women link kindness with long-term compatibility. 73%.
Kindness, not dominance.
Exactly. And the APA, again, they found 68% of men feel pressured to act tough. So it's not necessarily that women want it, and men themselves feel trapped by it too.
That really paints a different picture. Okay, let's talk about the bad boy. Because pop culture, wow, it loves that archetype, doesn't it?
Oh, undeniably. James Dean, Fight Club, that kind of rebellious, maybe aloof, sometimes aggressive guy gets romanticized a lot.
Yeah.
But here's something worrying from the research. A 2023 meta-analysis looked at romance films. Get this. 89% depicted toxic behaviors, things like stalking, possessiveness, aggression as if they were romantic gestures.
89%, that's huge. No wonder things get confused.
Right, but then you look at real-world interactions, things change. Dating apps, a Cambridge study show profiles saying stuff like, "I always win arguments." They got 40% fewer matches.
Fewer. Okay, so in practice, maybe not so attractive.
Seems like it. And it's not just dating. What about work?
Yeah, good point.
Leanin.org found 62% of women prefer male colleagues who are collaborative, not the overly dominant types. So personal, professional. The evidence doesn't really back up this idea that women are drawn to toxicity.
What about that initial spark, though?
Yeah.
Some people talk about being drawn to narcissistic traits, at least at first. Our sources mention that, right?
They do. There's a study, Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, 2021. It found that, yeah, narcissists might seem really confident, even charismatic initially, but it doesn't last. Their lack of empathy, their self-centeredness, that initial appeal fades pretty quickly when people realize there's no real substance or connection there.
So the flashiness wears off.
Pretty much.
And the whole evolutionary argument.
Yeah.
That women are somehow hardwired to want an aggressive protector.
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. But anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher, she offers a really interesting counter perspective. She basically argues that evolution likely favored cooperation and empathy. Well, think about group survival. Was it the aggressive lone wolf who helped the group thrive? Or was it the males who could cooperate, build alliances, show empathy, and maintain social bonds? She argues the latter was way more advantageous.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Shifts the focus entirely. So if that traditional alpha, the dominant aggressive one, is kind of outdated and maybe not what people truly value, what does a modern healthy version look like?
It's definitely an evolution. Instead of focusing on dominance, it's more about things like integrity, resilience, empathy, real inner strength, not just posturing.
Okay. And one of our sources laid out a framework for this, right? The winner framework. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, it's quite practical. WINNER. The W is for work ethic over entitlement.
Okay, work ethic entitlement. What's the idea there?
Basically, that respect and success come from putting in the effort, from achieving things, not just demanding or expecting them because of who you are. The source used Elon Musk as a sort of complex example. You see the intense work ethic, but maybe also some behavior that comes across as entitled. It makes you think, what actually earns lasting respect?
Interesting contrast. It's about the doing, not just the demanding. What's I?
I is for integrity over ego. So, acting in line with your values, being honest, and crucially, being willing to admit when you're wrong. That's the opposite of needing to always be right, always dominate.
Right, which is a core toxic trait.
Exactly. The example given was Satya Nadella at Microsoft, how he handled the backlash after the Xbox One launch, admitting mistakes, rebuilding trust. That's integrity in action.
Yeah, that takes real strength, setting the ego aside.
It really does. Okay, next is N, nurture relationships over transactional interactions. Meaning investing in genuine connections. Being a good mentor, actually listening, celebrating other people's wins. Not just seeing interactions as ways to get something for yourself.
That feels like a direct counter to that hyper-competitive thing we talked about.
Totally. Then the second N is navigate challenges with curiosity.
Ooh, I like that. So don't see setbacks as like the end of the world.
Exactly. See them as chances to learn, to grow, to figure things out. It builds resilience in a much healthier way than just, gritting your teeth and denying it hurts.
Yeah, reframing challenges as learning opportunities. Makes sense. What's the E?
E is for empathy as a superpower. And this one's huge. A Harvard Business Review study found empathetic leaders saw like a 40% boost in team performance.
40%, just from empathy.
Yeah. It's not soft, it's incredibly effective. It builds trust, connection, everything.
That's powerful. Okay, and the final R.
R is responsibility for impact. Basically, being aware of how your words and actions land on other people. Owning that impact. Being considerate.
So the whole winner framework paints a picture of strength that's based on character, connection, growth. Much more appealing, honestly.
I think so too.
So, okay, what if someone's listening and maybe recognizes some of those less healthy, more toxic patterns in themselves? What can they actually do?
That's the key question, isn't it? And it starts with some honest self-reflection, which isn't always easy.
Yeah.
The source had some good prompt questions like,
Yeah.
do you interrupt people a lot to make your point? Do you think kindness is basically weakness? Do you use jokes to kind of put people down? Asking yourself stuff like that is the first step.
Tough questions, but necessary. And then what are the concrete actions? How do you actually change the behavior?
Yeah, the source called them behavior swap exercises, little conscious shifts. Like instead of the default man up if someone's having a hard time,
Right.
try saying, hey, it's okay to feel overwhelmed, you want to talk about it. It's choosing empathy over dismissal.
Okay, that's a clear swap.
Or instead of brushing off a decision with, I don't care, you choose, maybe try, well, I'd lean towards X, but what are you thinking? I'm open. It shows you value their input.
Small changes, but they signal a big difference in approach. Collaboration versus dominance.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual effort either. Allies are crucial.
How so?
Well, a Harvard study, 2022, found that when men step up and call out toxic behavior from other men, like sexist jokes or interrupting women, it actually reduces harassment in the workplace by 30%.
30% reduction just from speaking up.
Yeah, so being that person who says, hey, not cool, or let her finish, it really matters. It helps shift the culture.
That's really empowering to know. Okay, so let's loop back to our cafe guys, Mark and Alex. Thinking about everything we've discussed, their futures might look pretty different, huh?
You can definitely imagine different paths. Mark, with the constant need to dominate, the lack of empathy, maybe he ends up with strained relationships, feeling isolated even if he seems successful on the surface. People get tired of that.
Yeah, it pushes people away eventually.
Whereas Alex, focusing on connection, respect, maybe that emotional intelligence, he's likely building stronger bonds, trust, better teamwork, a more fulfilling path probably in the long run.
So really the big takeaway here seems to be toxic masculinity. It's not attractive. It's actually repellent over time. Real strength, the kind people are drawn to, that seems to lie in growth, connection, empathy, lifting others up, not putting them down.
Beautifully put. It's about understanding that vulnerability isn't weak, it's human. And real confidence comes from knowing yourself and caring about others, not from trying to control them.
This has been really insightful, cleared up a lot, I think, and it leaves us, and you listening, with maybe one final thought to chew on. When your own story gets written, what do you want the headline to be? Will you be remembered for the fear you might have instilled, or for the genuine, lasting respect you actually earned?
That's a powerful question to leave things on. Really makes you think.